For more than 2 decades, I have written in a diary almost every single day. And guess what? I saved them all. Each week, I will be reading from these archives and getting to know myself from the lens of my 10, 16, 25, and 36-year-old self. We'll explore big topics such as body image, queerness, divorce, addiction, mental health, and friendship. I'll read cringy poems and attempt to find compassion for the painful tenderness of my younger self. Join the drama of me and my guests as we explore our boy-crazy, closeted, angsty selves, one stupid page at a time. Hello, beautiful humans. I'm back. I was on vacation last week and had a wonderful and complicated time in Mexico. I have shared it with a couple people, and I know that it's better if when people say, "Oh, how was your trip?" I know it's better if I'm like, "It was great," and it was great. It was great. The weather was fantastic. I did a lot of swimming. I did a lot of relaxing. The food was fucking amazing. And the truth of it is like, I also spent a lot of time in deep anxiety. I had a few good cries. I had some physical pain. Yeah, it was a mixed bag. I find the older I get, the more mixed bag traveling becomes. When I was younger, actually, you know what? According to the last 2 diaries I've read, it was probably always a mixed bag, if I'm being honest. I think I am somebody who thrives with routine and structure, and I have a very sensitive nervous system, and travel is not good for any of that. And I want to do it anyways. So I think the fact that I have had a challenging time while traveling is a part of me. It's part of what makes me me. And it's not going to stop me from traveling. So yeah, I'm trying to, I guess, talk myself out of any shame that I feel around coming home from such a beautiful trip that was a gift, and not just saying it was amazing, it was 100% good. I feel a little bit of shame around that. I wish I was like an easier person to travel with, but as my lovely sweetheart Shiva would tell you, I'm not really the easiest person to travel with. So and hopefully he still wants to do it with me anyways. But yeah, it was a complicated time, but had made some really beautiful memories. Swimming in the cenote was unreal amazing. The water was, I've never swam in water like that. It was so clear and so the perfect temperature, and was just really, really lovely. The food was top notch. We were in Playa del Carmen, and I'm probably saying that wrong. And the food was really, really good. I don't think I ate a single thing that I was like, meh. Everything I ate was outstanding. And yeah, I'm ready to get back to life. It's Tuesday on the day I'm recording this, and I've been back to work for a couple of days, and my body is kind of acclimating to being back home. My nervous system is more regulated, and I am getting back into the swing of things. So happy to be with you all today. When I sat down to do recording today, I was like, what am I gonna do on the podcast today? Because so for the last 2 episodes, I've gone back. So up until now, with the exception of a few episodes, I've been reading fairly chronologically, starting with my diary when I was 10. And then as of now, whatever number episode this is, I am in high school, like about to finish high school. And no, that's not true. I'm in like grade 10. And then I've taken a little detour these last 2 episodes, including this one, to read from a travel journal from when I was in Thailand in 2018. And I guess At the time, 2 episodes ago, I thought the reason I was doing that was because a friend of mine and me were talking about just the crazy shit we've done while traveling, and it made me feel very nostalgic for that time. But now I'm kind of seeing there's other reasons why I've chosen to go through these diaries. One is probably because I knew that I was going to be anxious on this trip to Mexico, and I really wanted to find a little compassion for myself, which I did. And I think the second reason is because I have a dream of being published with Modern Love, which is a column in the New York Times. I mean, chances are you've definitely heard of it, but if you haven't, feel free to like go on to the New York Times and read a couple essays. I don't think you can do it for free, but they also have an awesome podcast. I think it's just called the Modern Love Podcast that you can listen to stories. They also, I think, have a show on Netflix. Haven't seen it, but have heard it's good. Basically, it's just like love stories. And in Modern Love, they're like, 2,000 words. It's not a long essay. So you like, it's kind of like, how do I fit an entire love story into like a short essay? And I love the writing. I think of all the curated columns or journals out there, it is one of the most competitive and just like finest top tier writing. So obviously I'm like, I want to be published with them. So I've been kind of working on this essay about what can only be called my greatest love story. And I would say I have a good draft done. And I wanted to explore these journals because, spoiler alert, I'm about to step into my greatest love story. And yeah, so I've been working on this essay about it, and I wanted to do some research, which required me to go back and listen to or read my old journal. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm going to read from the rest of this diary that is, again, it's March 2018. I'm on the very tail end of a 5-week trip to Thailand, where the first half I spent in Chiang Mai with Jason, my best friend, eating and walking and sharing time together. And then for the second leg of the trip, I flew to an island called Koh Samui, where I was staying in a very isolated part of the island with just like basically no humans around. I got up to some misadventures, and I was just absolutely saturated with loneliness. I also had a casual relationship with a man at home who I am calling W. And we had this kind of on again, off again thing for the last couple months. He was the first guy that I dated, like proper dated, since my ex. So I was kind of, I don't want to say a shell of a human because I don't think that's very fair, but I was definitely in a really, really bad place mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in regards to my body image, in regards to my non-existent sobriety, because I was still in very active addiction then. And I was just, I was working on my book. I was like essentially unemployed, and I was just had just moved out on my own for literally the first time in my life. I was living by myself. And it was a really wild and difficult time in my life. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a recap of how I ended the last episode, and then I'm going to share my love story. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being here. All right, to set the scene of where this love story takes place, it takes place in the airport in Bangkok, and just before I flew, I had to take a short flight from Koh Samui to Bangkok to get my flight home. And my last day in Koh Samui, again, I've been on this island essentially only by myself which was probably not the best time for me to like be by myself because I wasn't doing very well. But I was also craving alone time after being in a very, very busy city. And I take myself out on this like kind of sad girl dinner date. And basically for weeks I had been walking by these beachside like huts that you could have a meal in and really just like overlooking the ocean, and it was so beautiful. And of course it's all couples. I mean, of course, it's like the most romantic thing ever. And I decided I'm going to take myself. And so I take myself out for dinner. I wear the only dress that I have. I do my hair, I do my makeup. A very shy, endearing waiter like takes my order and is just like keeps repeatedly asking me like, are you sure you're by yourself? Like he was just confused. And I'm like, yeah, I'm by myself. And I go back to my room after that, and I don't know, I have this weird moment of sad clarity that was just like, I just felt so alone. And this was wrapped up in, again, I had split up with my ex, who I was with for 7 years, just 1 year prior. And over the course of that year, I had been involved in a lot of situationships and had just like had my heart broken, had broken a heart, had my heart broken, had broken a heart, like just over and over and over. So I was like a rag doll at this point. And I was just so lonely. I just remember, going to bed that night just being like so sad. And the next day I woke up and it was my last day in Koh Samui. And I had this very spiritual day where I ended the day with me walking into the sea, as sad girls do. And I just kind of like talked to the water, spirit, God, myself, like whatever you want to call that force. I felt it, and it was asking me like, what do you want? I heard the question, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And so I walked into the sea and was like, here are the things that I want. And I wrote it down after I got out of the sea, and I said, it's like, so I did a thing. I walked into the sea. And I say, let me see the date on this. This is must be like end of March, 2019. But let me just try to find the date. It is 2018. This is a long ass entry. It is on March 29th, 2018. So I say, it's hard to ask for what we want. Actually, it's not hard. It's easy. Just scary sometimes. It's, I suppose, okay to want something with all your heart and be terrified of it at the same time. So these are some things that I want. To feel like I'm 16 again. To feel safe. To tell someone everything. To be monogamous. That was a big one, actually, because my year of dating after my ex involved a lot of murkiness in the realm of monogamy. I did not want to pledge my allegiance to anybody because I had been cheated on, and I just was like, monogamy is not the way. So for me to say I actually deeply want monogamy was actually very scary. To love someone so much I want to marry them. This was another huge one because I had never, after things ended with my ex, I just was like, never again am I going to get that close to someone. To introduce someone to my family, to bring them to Dad's, to show them my book, to travel with them, to be still, be silent, no distractions, to go to Vipassana, go to an ashram, travel alone again, publish my book, go on a tour, do public readings, get criticism, get praise, let it all go, hold on, get a new catering kitchen, make an actual semi-permanent decision, invest, risk, and spend. So obviously that's from a previous life of mine, but I did end up doing that for a couple years before I switched to writing. Let go of the patterns that no longer serve me but make me feel safe. Let go of C, and then let go of a list of other people. Tell the truth, be enough, be skinny. Okay, problematic, but okay. Wear my bikini and be goddamn proud of my body. Post a scandalous selfie. Post a before and after. Feel really strong. Actually be really strong. Set an eating and exercise plan and actually stick to it. Gross. Feel beautiful in my skin. Feel sexy. Be uninhibited without alcohol. Okay, so that's like one of the first times I've probably ever been like, maybe I could do it without alcohol. Tie W to my bed. Perform a striptease. Ask for what I want. Go back to church. Find God. Pray. Meditate. Do the things that make me feel best daily. Drink more water, drink more tea, actually be sober for a month. Eat better, eat less animals. Decide who I want to be really honest about that all of the time. Listen more, be quiet more, observe more, stay calm, be gentle, be thoughtful, be a person people can trust, be a person people can talk to, and do what I say I'm going to do. So I actually think that's a pretty fucking earnest list, and a lot of the things on that list make me feel really proud. Some of the things on this list make me feel really icky. A lot of the things on this list have come true for me, and there's quite a few things that I'm still working on. So it's really fun to have a diary to reflect back like all your hopes and dreams and failures to you as well. The entry continues. I am writing nonstop, and I end the entry with a little final wish. So I say, one thing about this trip is that I didn't really meet any new people, aside from that mini conversation I had at the one hostel I stayed in. The last trip, I thrived so heavily on those connections that I made with Annika and Jules and Kumal and Mike. But this trip, I suppose, was more about connecting with self. It's different being the social creature that I am. That's funny. Introvert here. I'm just like, when am I a social creature? Connecting would have been magical. And if I made a friend, I think that would have sent me shooting high into the sky. But I didn't. And it's okay. It's all perfect. I didn't reach outside my comfort zone like I usually do, and it's okay. This trip, I wanted convenience, and I wanted to feel at home somewhere. I wanted rest, and apparently I wanted solitude. Right after I wrote that, I get on my first plane from Koh Samui to Bangkok, and I say, the airport wasn't nearly as crazy as I thought, because I had heard that like the airport in Bangkok's really crazy. I finished this entry by saying, I guess in hindsight, I wish I would have spent a little more, or I would have been a little more adventurous on this trip. I wish I would have ventured out a little more, been able to meet someone, cooked for someone, maybe done something off the beaten path. I don't know what I was so afraid of. Being lost, I suppose. Having that language barrier that is sometimes frustrating, but not actually painful. I feared too much and craved comfort. I guess because in my own life, there's been a lack of stability in these last few years, and I've been craving that kind of security and grounding. And that's what I did on this trip. I met with my root chakra, and now that she's satisfied and glowing, I feel this natural sense to come out of that. And to meet with some other chakras. I'm being so cute. My heart, my throat chakra, which has been closed for the last week with a lack of conversation and lack of human contact. And my third eye chakra that sees things so very clearly now, but needs to continue to stay open so my crown can spew out all this light inside of me. So yeah, I'm feeling very lonely and trying to make peace with the fact that this wasn't a trip that resulted in new friendship. And that is one of my favorite parts of traveling, is meeting other travelers, activating a part of me that I don't get to activate very often in my daily life, which is just like walking up to a stranger and saying hello. It is one of my absolute all-time favorite things, and the reason that I will always travel solo. And yeah, it just was a weird, when I ended this trip and I'm like on the very last moment of this trip, I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to meet someone because like the trip's over and I'm flying home tomorrow. And then March 30th, 2018. I'm sitting in the airport after an absolute whirlwind of a morning, crying my eyes out because I'm pretty sure I just fell in love. I miss that person so badly. And because I haven't cried in weeks. And because I'm just so grateful. Thank you, universe, for showing me more of who I want to be. Thank you, universe, for giving me exactly what I asked for. Thank you, universe, for Chetan and Mr. Wong and for Thailand. Wow. It's such a journey. Like, literally moments. The entry before this was just me, walking on this famous road in Bangkok, just, eating noodles on the curb and just like talking about all the things I miss back home and reflecting on this trip. And then like hours later, I'm literally like, holy shit, I just fell in love. I'm so curious to know what your reactions are. Are you rolling your eyes? Are you smiling? Are you like, what the fuck? I'm pretty sure I was all of those things in this moment. And I'm all of those things reading back on it because I can't believe the shift that the shift that I went through in this airport. Okay, so next I'm going to read this entry and then I'm going to read the essay that I wrote, and then I'm going to read the draft of the essay that I have. And then I'm going to read what happens after. So I got up at 5 as planned. I got ready quickly and had mango sticky rice and tea and got a cab to the airport. I guess I was feeling a little cranky. I didn't even practice my usual let's smile and be really happy at check-in dance that I usually do. There was a silly guy in line asking people random questions, and he seemed so lost. I just wanted to avoid him. But we ended up getting out of the line at the same time and looking for our gate. He looked at me kind of goofy and said, "Did you have a good trip?" "Yeah," I said. And this began our 4-hour romance. We wandered around the airport. He went pee and asked if I'd wait for him. "Yeah, what the hell," I said. He was the first person I met on this trip, after all. I went with him for a cigarette, and he showed me his tattoo. We chit-chatted, normal backpacker banter, I guess. I thought he was strange, I'll admit, but very, very friendly. When I introduced myself, he gave me a hug, and I loved that. So I meet this guy in line at the airport, and I'm feeling tired and cranky. It's 5 a.m., and I'm just like, who the fuck is this guy? Why is he talking to me? And I'm slowly warming up to him because he's just like the most friendly, vibrant human ever. We wandered through security and passport checks and laughed the whole time. One of the things I noticed about him was how often he smiled at babies. We went to get food. He bought me a tea with his last baht, and we exchanged a few travel stories. He told me about how his mom died when he was 9. It was so refreshing to have real talk, not small talk. I thought our time would be over when we got on the plane because we had different seats. But then luck and destiny wound us up next to each other. Ha! We both had window seats, but something happened with a woman who seemed quite angry. She moved and voila, he was sitting next to me. How? How is this happening? I asked. I miss you already, he said. He looked so cute. This description, guys, this description. He looked so cute. Goofy hat, Ray-Bans, scruffy beard, big brown eyes. I don't think he was my type, but here we are. Anyways, we spent our time on the plane cuddling and falling in love. Everything about it was perfection. I had kissed him on the cheek when I thought we were parting ways, which made him smile very big. And then when he sat next to me, he put his feet up on me. There were unwritten things being written. He was feeling cuddly, perhaps after 3 whiskey shots and a glass of wine, but honestly, it didn't feel strange. It felt completely normal, like I'd known him my whole life or something, and I could tell he felt the same. He was looking at me longingly. He was being sweet and funny. He was showing me his scars from Thailand, telling me stories, and we spent the whole flight laughing, talking, and flirting. I told him I'd been with 2 women. I told him about Mike-ish. I told him about the Tragically Hip concert in Stratford with Dad. He fell asleep while I was in the washroom, so I talked to my other seatmate, a 75-year-old Asian man named Mr. Wong. Ha! We talked, and he told me about his history as a teacher, moving to Australia, his son and daughter. I woke Chaitin to see if he wanted dinner. He woke up, and we continued with our flirting and talking. I introduced him to Mr. Wong, and they arm wrestled. We all laughed so hard. Mr. Wong said to me multiple times, "You very happy girl." And I smiled and said, well, why wouldn't I be? In the retelling of this story, like I've told the story of me and Chaitin multiple times over the years. And I kind of always, Mr. Wong isn't like a part of the story when I retell it, but reading back on this, I realized like Mr. Wong is actually a very important character in the story. I don't have like there's literally no way I would ever cross paths with this human again. But in the moment, like I just remember he was so endearing, and he just kept looking at us and being like, "You're so happy, you're so in love." And I remember him asking us like, "How long have you been married, or how long have you been together?" And I said, like, we were both like, "Oh, we just met, like literally we just met an hour ago." And he was like, "Wow, I can tell that you guys are like very good friends, like deep connection." And I remember Chaitin responding and saying, "Yeah, it was love at first sight." It was love at first sight. When there was a bit of turbulence, I asked Chaitin what he would do if the plane went down. I was completely unafraid to ask such a question. He told me he would take me right then and there and kiss me. But then he said that he would actually try to comfort people, to tell them they can't change it, it's their time. It was a beautiful answer. Mr. Wong said seeing us made him feel lonely. This was a feeling I felt dozens of times over the last week on planes and beaches all over Thailand. I had watched lovers with longing. It was something I wished for just yesterday, in fact, to be in love in an airport, to feel 16 again. It was magical as I was thinking about it. And then Chaitin kissed me. It was a great kiss, unexpected, but I guess I should have been able to tell by how he was looking at me the whole time. I was speechless. Honestly, I barely knew what to do. He made me blush, and he made me feel safe. He made me feel really amazing. just how I am. The way he played with my braids. Yeah, that was a really endearing part. The way he watched me when I wrote. The way he checked me out and listened to me and asked me questions. Guys, I'm like full crying right now, and wow. We talked a little We talked a little about what came next, about how meeting people when you travel can be hard. He asked me if I could fall in love with someone. I said, of course. I fall in love with people all the time. I guess I said that because I wish that was my truth. And maybe it is. I wish I could be more open, and perhaps Chayton was here to show me this. Perhaps the universe really did just give me the person that I am meant to be with, and perhaps it was just a fleeting, beautiful moment. Who knows? ... All I know is that it was special and beautiful and everything I wanted and everything I needed. It made the last week of loneliness so worth it. It made all the lessons even brighter. When we got off the plane, he made a joke about joining the Mile High Club. He actually had a hard on, which was maybe a little edgy, but I guess I appreciate it. Oh, to be young and in love. We went through airport stuff, literally laughing our butts off. Everything was funny. We stood in this one line and he was telling me about how last year he had to learn some hard lessons, how it was the best year of his life so far. And then he said, I'm just feeling so fucking good right now. Like, this year is going to be the best one yet. He had a deja vu and we talked about how good life is. And then we had to part ways. At the end of the line was a hotel room waiting for him because he had a long layover. And my flight was in just a few hours. Right. So this flight we were taking from Bangkok to, I honestly can't remember. I think China. Like, I can't remember where the layover was. But then I had to catch my flight from China to Toronto. And he had like a full day layover. And then he had to catch a flight from China to LA. So his plan was to leave the airport and go get a hotel room. The girl at the checkout counter made it very clear that we had to part ways. So we said our goodbyes. We dropped our bags. Is this it? He said as we embraced. A long, wonderful hug. I'm so glad I met you, I said into his ear, and then he pulled me in for a really long kiss. There was lots of kissing, and then lots of sadness when we knew it was time to go. And away I went. I'm dying to know what you all are thinking about this. This was really special to read back on. And I'm also just like so happy tears that this story is mine, that this happened to me, that I got to know this kind of love that I never thought I would get to know. There's a twist in the story, guys. There's a twist. So the twist is that a couple years before, actually, you know what? I'm going to go run and get a copy of my book because there's a story that I need to read to you from my book, Salt and Sour. Hang tight. All right, I'm going to depart Bangkok for just a moment and take you back to 2016. I am running my restaurant full-time with my then partner, who is the subject of this book. And I decide to go to Bermuda for 5 days for a destination wedding. And this is an important part of the story. So here goes. This is from page 97 of Salt and Sour. I bumped into some of the people I'd met the night before who all high-fived me as I waited in line for waffles, all of them referring to me by my new nickname, the Dance Machine. A man I barely recognized came up beside me, put his arm around my shoulder, and chuckled. "Howdy, dance partner." I shrugged and headed for the omelet bar, wondering if I'd made a fool of myself the night before. It was unlike me to let loose like that since opening the restaurant. I had become reclusive and was usually too tired after work to go out. It wasn't unheard of that I pulled an all-nighter in my past, but I certainly wasn't used to being the life of the party anymore. While I was eating brunch with my new friends, my dance partner from the night before pulled a chair up beside us. Nick, I found out, was a friend of the groom. He seemed friendly and full of joy. We sat at the table as a group sharing stories of our lives at home, while Nick told us all about his wife and kids. He even pulled out a photo from his wallet of his wife. He was so old school, a classic. We became friends instantly. Nick and I spent the entire day together. We hunted for aloe vera to soothe our sunburns. We indulged with a second breakfast. We smoked cigars. We drank rum and banana and coconut drinks. We went down the kids' slide. It was a perfect, silly, wonderful day. The vacation was working. My stress was melting away. That whole week was a series of indulgent days and late nights, as resort life often is. All of the bride and groom's friends from different circles were meeting and mingling, and I sincerely liked everyone I met. But Nick and I connected more deeply than the others. Both of us were traveling solo, escaping the stress of our day-to-day lives, and we were both enjoying being a little bit rebellious, staying out late, smoking and drinking far too much. We spent our time lounging by the pool, swimming in the ocean, eating fried pineapple rice, and nursing our hangovers. We spent evenings with our new group of friends in the lobby bar, rehashing our days and laughing until it felt like our sides were splitting open. When my new friends told me they found me hilarious, it took me a while to even acknowledge it. Yes, I am funny, I thought to myself. I am witty and quick, and I just made a girl shoot bar lime out her nose. Perhaps it was just the alcohol, but I made people laugh on that trip, and I too laughed harder than I had in a long time. At the restaurant, I often received compliments about my food, talent, and the physical aspects of the restaurant, but rarely about the human in me. People told me how inspiring it was that I changed the menu every single week, but they never told me that I was a good person or that I was generous or kind. I was always so busy at the restaurant that I seldom had time to sit with my friends, get drunk, and be silly. When I was with Jeff, I found myself withdrawn, especially when we were out in public. It always felt like there wasn't room at the table for both of us. Nick and I stayed up late talking until the sun came up for days on end. We talked about his music career. We talked about his near-suicide attempt. We talked about Lewis. We talked about his favorite things about his wife. We talked about his father's death. We talked about the restaurant. We talked about Jeff. We talked about my sister's tumor. Morning came, and when the whirlpools got turned on and we saw the bartender shaving ice and juicing limes, I resented having to end our talk and go to bed. I never wanted it to end, but I of course knew it had to. On our last night, we stayed up drinking gin straight from the bottle and played a game which we called the Desert Island game. If you were stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life, what 5 records would you bring? What 3 foods would you not want to live without? We went back and forth until I asked him, if you were on a desert island, who would you bring if you could? He couldn't answer the question in his drunken stupor, so we ended the game and went up to our rooms. The next morning, we lazily relaxed in the lobby, waiting for our bus to take us to the airport. We stopped for souvenirs for him to take home to his kids. I bought the kitchen crew a dancing turtle. We took one last dip in the ocean. I wasn't sure if we'd ever see each other again, but I knew our time was special, and when I thought of him, I felt loved from the inside out. When I got home from Bermuda, I told Jeff all about my trip. I told him about how beautiful the flowers at the wedding were, how smooth the sand had felt between my toes, and I told him all about meeting Nick and the others. What I didn't tell him was that I hadn't longed to come home. Now that I was back to my old life, my anxiety had suddenly come back and the knot in my stomach returned. I missed the way I felt when I was with Nick. No matter how platonic it had been, missing another man made me feel guilty. I had nothing to feel guilty for, but the feeling lingered and I didn't know what to make of it. After I was home for a few days, Jeff and I were eating dinner one night, and just for fun I asked him, hey, if you were stranded on a desert island and you could only bring one person with you, who would you bring? He was confused by the question. Why am I on the island? I don't know, the plane crashed. You're there for life, I explained. Won't I be rescued? He asked, puzzled. No, you're there forever, and you can pick one person to be there with you. How does that make sense? He laughed. Look, it's just a game. Just answer. They can be dead or alive. Doesn't matter. Who would you bring? I prodded. Jeff furrowed his brow and thought about it for a few minutes. Finally, he answered, probably Karl Marx, or maybe Eddie Vedder. I laughed and started doing the dishes. After dinner, Jeff went to the post office to deliver some mail and came back with a large brown envelope in his hands. Who is Nick? He asked sternly. I answered honestly. He's one of the guys from the wedding last week. I told you about him. Okay, but why is he mailing you love letters? I looked at the package Jeff was holding and noticed it was torn open at the side, and that's when I realized it was a package from Nick. I barked at Jeff matter-of-factly that it wasn't a love letter. It was a copy of the record he'd made that he'd promised he would mail me before we left Bermuda. I snatched the package from him and emptied the contents onto my desk. There was a CD and a letter, and I felt I had no choice but to read the letter while standing in front of Jeff. I tried not to let my face show any kind of reaction. The letter read, Yoda, you asked me one night if I could only bring one person to a desert island, who would I bring? I couldn't bring my wife because my kids would miss her too much. I couldn't bring one of my kids because that wouldn't be fair to the other. I couldn't bring my dad because I know he belongs in heaven and I will see him there one day. My answer, I would bring you. You are a bright light in a dark world. Don't ever change. Nick. So the chapter that's in my book, Salt and Sour, is longer. There's much more to this story. I won't get into it here on this episode, but I will say that Nick, the character of Nick, is very, very important to the rest of this story with Chayton. So again, Nick is the character from 2016 who I met in Bermuda, who sent me this letter, and Chayton I meet in 2018 in the airport in Bangkok. So I'm going to now read you an excerpt from the essay that I wrote that I am working on for Modern Love. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I am planning on submitting this, but I do want to read you from this essay. And I really hope you guys enjoy. I haven't read this essay or draft to anybody except Shiva, so please enjoy some of my writing. The check-in desk for my flight was way at the back of the airport, and that's where I first saw him. He had a clunky dark blue hockey bag slung over his shoulder and a confused, tired face. The way I've always told this story of how we met is that we made awkward eye contact, and he eventually won me over with his childlike curiosity. I think what is more true is he asked me to go for a cigarette, and I reluctantly went because A, I didn't know how to say no to men yet, and B, I wasn't ready for my adventure to be over yet, and C, I thought he was cute, and I just spent the last several days navigating conversations with strangers who didn't speak English, and I was so lonely. Outside, he smoked while dramatically regaling ridiculous tales of his travels. He talked more than he listened, but I didn't care. He'd had such a big life, and I wanted to know everything. We had more time to kill, so we went for breakfast, and were in a fit of laughter when we heard the last boarding call for our plane. We had more time to kill, so we went for breakfast, and were in a fit of laughter when we heard the last boarding call for our plane and both our names over the loudspeaker. He threw down his bot as we were sprinting, and as we were sprinting through the airport, I realized I might miss my flight for some weird guy that I didn't even know, and cursed myself. The airport workers and first-class passengers scowled at us as we rushed onto the plane. He wanted to sit beside me, but I was tired, and I was so used to being alone then, I didn't want to make a fuss. We arranged to change seats with someone, and so we sat next to each other from the flight from Bangkok to Hong Kong. We talked more about our lives, and that's when I told him I was in Thailand because of my recent separation. He looked at me with sad eyes and then made me laugh again. I don't know how or when or why it happened, but I felt flooded with certainty that we were soulmates. Sometimes we just silently looked at each other and said, "This is weird." Neither of us could believe it. Our seatmate thought we were a couple, and when we told him we just met, it felt like magic was pouring from all of my cells. At some point, he kissed me. We kissed each other. His lips were warm and wet, and I know it was just sweat, but I swear he tasted like the sea in Koh Samui. He spent the next few hours trying to convince me to have sex with him in the airplane bathroom. He was spontaneous and sweet and young. I was none of those things, but he almost talked me into it. Before we disembarked, I gave him my notebook, and he drew me a picture and wrote me a short note. We held hands through the airport. I think at one point we were skipping. I'd never been so connected to someone like this before, and the part of me knew it would never happen like this again. There were some logistics because I had a layover that was only an hour and he had a full day in the city, so he was going to get a hotel room. He tried once more to get me to sleep with him, and I wanted to, but there wasn't time. So I kissed him over and over, and we held on to each other until we tore our bodies away from one another, a violent and tender act. I found my gate and sat, almost immediately bursting into tears. In some ways, those tears held all my sadness, loneliness, hurt, frustration, rage, overwhelm, and in other ways, they were just about joy. Moments ago, I'd been in love. I was still in love. I was a different person now. I'd let love change me, and it was good. I missed him so much already. So I took out my journal to see what he'd written. I needed to know that those few minutes he spent holding my pen instead of my hand were worth it. His note was lovely and childlike, and there was a picture of some Thai beach we'd both known. He told me he loved my energy, that I was cool, and he hoped we'd meet again. And then right at the bottom, the words, "Don't ever change." There was an audible gasp that took me a few moments to register as my own. I threw my carry-on to the ground and started digging through my bag to find my little satchel where I kept my most important things. The photo of my dog, my parents, my sister, the $20 American bill for emergencies, the photocopy of my passport and ID, and a letter. The letter was from Nick, a man I'd met 3 years earlier at a destination wedding. Nick was happily married to his high school sweetheart and had 2 beautiful babies. At the time we met, I was still with my ex, heartbroken and exhausted, but still unwilling to leave. We were the only 2 people on the trip without our partners, so we clung to each other and became fast friends. We bonded over our love of classic rock, Hendrix gin, and a deep grief we both seemed to know that others just didn't. He told me that his father had recently died. I told him I wanted to leave my husband but felt stuck. We went swimming. We smoked cigars. If there was ever a flirtation between us, it felt pure and narrow, and born out of childlike fondness rather than loneliness or desire. I think he wanted to go home to his wife and kids, but I didn't ever want to leave that island. He asked for my address so he could mail me his most recent demo. His band had covered an Allman Brothers song that he knew I would love. A week later, my husband was standing in our living room clutching a brown shipping envelope torn open, the contents clutched in his fist, demanding to know who Nick was. I tried to explain the friendship, but knew that as the words passed my lips, it meant the friendship was over. He threw the CD and letter onto the floor. I scooped everything up and threw it in the trash. I waited until he went to bed and then snuck into the trash bin to read the letter that had upset my husband so much. Digging through the trash felt like cheating, but it didn't feel bad. In the letter, Nick said I was the first person he'd been able to share his mother. Nick said I was the first person he'd been able to share the grief of. This is a typo in my essay. Good thing I found it. In the letter, Nick said I was the first person he'd been able to share his grief of losing his father with, other than his mother, since he had died. That he was both sad and happy that he finally knew someone who could hold his grief, that I was special. He ended the letter with, "Don't ever change." So, there is a twist. And I remember that moment so well. I was holding my diary, which is where Chayton had written this note to me, and then in one hand, and I was clutching this note that I carried around with me for years from this essentially stranger, Nick, and they both said the same words, "Don't ever change." And I just cried. I just wept and wept. And then you'll never guess who came around the corner. So I honestly don't know if I should read from my diary to explain this next part of the story or from my essay. I'm going to read from both. So in my diary, I wrote, "I found a comfy chair and sat and then started writing this. And yes, I started bawling my eyes out. Really happy, wonderful tears of gratitude. And I let myself just cry there for a minute." So I'm going to share somehow the photo that I took of myself in this moment. It's one of my favorite photos of myself. I don't know why I took the photo. I'm not accustomed to taking photos of myself while I'm bawling my eyes out, but I did. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful photo. Okay, so I said, and then I started writing, and I felt full of love and also sadness for Chayton being gone. And then there he was. I guess his visa expired early, and he had a bit of a rough go going through security. But he said he searched the whole airport trying to find me, and he did. I was so happy to see him. I gave him a big hug and told him how happy I was. So basically, his plan was to leave the airport and go get a hotel because he had this full day layover, but he couldn't leave the airport because he didn't have the proper visa. So he ended up chilling with me until my flight left. We found some chairs, and I told him I had to tell him something. I showed him his letter and the "don't ever change" part. And then I actually showed him the letter that Nick gave me and told him the story and showed him that I was, in fact, a little weirded out by all the parallels. I told Chayton the story of Jeff finding the letter and how I always kept it because it meant so much to me. And then I let him read it. I've never shown anyone that letter before. And Chayton cried. Sweet, vulnerable, compassionate tears. And we sat there embracing, sharing our words and our emotions. We don't say sorry for our emotions. I don't know who said that. One of us said that because it's in quotes. And then I read him what I wrote about him before he came back. I think I just fell in love. Thank you, universe. He smiled really big and said, "Thank you, universe," and kissed me. We hung out in the airport, talking and cuddling and listening to music, and then it was time for me to go again. I wrote him a quick love letter about how grateful I was for him with my contact info. I showed him my glasses, and he gave me I remember he was bugging me to put my glasses on. I guess he likes girls with glasses. And he gave me a very passionate, hard kiss right there in the airport. It was quite sexy, those kisses that followed. I blew him a kiss and was off again. "Don't ever change," he called out. It was so beautiful. Yeah, it was so beautiful. So after that, the journal is just probably a few dozen pages ongoing after that. And I'm on this long flight from Hong Kong back to Toronto. I land, I go home alone. I spend a couple of days with crippling jet lag. If you've ever been to like Southeast Asia and you're from, Eastern Standard Time, And then I just kind of got back to life, and I was writing about Chayton a lot. I don't know. I wrote this, it's undated, but I wrote, I've had this huge shift the moment I walked into the sea and spoke of what I wanted. I broke through this big block, and here I am, just 48 hours later. The universe literally gave me exactly what I wanted. Literally. To feel like I was 16 again, to open my heart, to meet someone and connect deeply, to hug someone, to feel desired, to meet someone, to fall in love, to not be bored with someone in an airport, to connect with someone and open all of my chakras. Life is actually insane. So then the next couple entries are just about, being home, the logistics of being home. I am realizing that I'm going to have to meet up with this W fellow and break things off officially. Just stop sleeping together, essentially. And then, like, I don't know, this entry where it's like April 4th. So I've just gotten home. I say, I'm not sure if I'm coming down with something. My nose is feeling really flared up and I'm feeling a little run down. Going to get some rest tonight. Breakfast with the gang was fun. Everyone told me I looked good and like I was glowing. Spent some time talking to Nicole and Pam and blah, 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 blah. I ate a big ass Greek salad and did some money organizing. Decided to go to the coffee shop to work on some book stuff because Andrea was coming over to work on some stuff. I honestly am like, what is that about? Anyways, home for a few hours, which I was going to use productively, but then decided to take a 2-hour nap. Feeling a little blah, but I woke up and something scurried to get ready to see W. So it's just like this kind of rehashing of life stuff, really, when I get back. So I'm going to end this episode by reading from the end of this essay that I'm working on. Again, this is just a draft, but here goes. I sat in the airport chair waiting for my flight to board, clutching both letters, one in each hand. I couldn't even cry. It was so beautiful. Lie. I definitely cried. I didn't even want to breathe in case it meant this wasn't real. It was real, though. And as I shook and heaved and held my breath, Chayton rounded the corner. He saw my face and ran over to me. He said he'd done the math and leaving the airport to find a hotel to sleep for a few hours didn't actually make sense, so he decided to just find a place to nap. He wanted to know what had me so hooked and looked down to see my journal open to his letter. I slipped Nick's letter from 2 years earlier into his hand. He read slowly, his brow scrunched up like my insides. I studied him as he absorbed it, as he understood. When he tilted his head to meet mine, his eyes were full of tears too. He held me as I sobbed into his shoulder and told him all about Nick, about my ex, about all the things I'd hidden from W, and about myself. I don't think he said anything, or maybe he did, and maybe it was profound, but I know that 20 minutes later he was walking with me as I moved up the line to enter the plane. We held hands and swayed, the way longtime lovers do. Back at home, I ended things with W. I started casually dating someone else almost immediately, and when I told her about Chayton, she said, "You know that wasn't love though, right?" And looked at me as if any answer other than, "Oh yeah, I know," would have made me seem crazy. I closed my eyes and said, "Oh yeah, I know," knowing that no matter what she said, no one could ever take what we made that day. Chayton was a drummer in California who sent me tipsy, blurry photos at 3 a.m. I was in bed by 9 o'clock, half-heartedly trying to get sober and planning my next trip. My life felt messy, and so did his, but we weren't the same kind of mess, and I knew. We talked of visiting once, but we both bailed. For the last few years, we send memes and text every once in a while, usually something along the lines of, "You look so happy, and that makes me happy." He always, always signs off with "Don't ever change." Yeah, so that's my best love story, folks. I've never shared it publicly, and I'm excited, and I'm gonna go work on this modern love essay and get it submitted because I think it's really, really good. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, I'm gonna be back, and I'm going to travel back to grade 10. And we'll continue on with what I've been sharing. But I'm so glad that you all made it for this episode. I'm super excited to be home and to be sharing with all of you and to be writing again. Last but not least, if you are someone who wants to build a writing practice, wants to edit poetry, wants to start a podcast, wants to do whatever, and you want support, I help people reach their dreams every single day. You can find all of my info at www.doulaofwords.com. Big love, everybody. Thanks for listening.